Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root, where we dive deep into understanding and addressing root causes of chronic health issues so you can help and find healing inside and out, now and forever. Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root. I'm Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice, Trifecta Collective. Welcome to the podcast. So today I want to talk about being a female business owner and building and running what I would consider a successful coaching practice, and also what it's like being a female business owner, some of the big lessons I have learned over the years that some of these I keep learning more about, and also big changes in your life and ways to kind of think about this. And the idea or the inspiration behind this podcast episode is really twofold. One, in the next couple of weeks, I'm getting ready to be a guest in a pretty decently large practitioner space and share my thoughts on building a successful coaching practice, a successful client facing and direct client focused holistic health practice. And it is primarily women who will be a part of this group. And so I'm thinking about things I want to speak about and talk about and share within this group of really highly educated women who are largely looking to also be in this space and find their own place in this space. But also within our practice, we work with so many women who some of them come into this, and I think more of them come into this than maybe even sometimes they realize, but coming into big life changes and thinking about big life changes, making moves and making decisions on these big life changes and how to do that. What does that look like? I also really want to talk about our relationship with fear in this episode because I think this is a highly, highly relevant topic. And as I put this together, especially right now, we have a handful of clients, some of which are my one-on-one clients, some of which are working with our other practitioners and or in one of our other coaching programs. And there's a lot of change. There's a lot of change happening right now. And I think it's really great. It's really beautiful. And it can be and feel like a lot. And this applies to women for reference. If you're sitting there and you're in your early 20s, you're like, yes, this is me. I am on the brink of changing things in my life. I am wanting to have a different type of life or build a different type of life or experience life a little bit differently than quote unquote the average person. But also women in their early 30s, early to mid 30s, late 30s, throughout the entire 40s, into your 50s, even into your early to late 70s. I've met some really amazing and fascinating women who are transitioning, and I don't want to say starting over because that's not the right word or phrase. It's really rejuvenating how they want their life to look, how they want to feel in their life. And I have done this many times and continue to coach many women in this kind of space. And honestly, I have shared this before. This is some of the most exciting, thrilling, fulfilling kind of work that I do is supporting women, certainly in the entirety of their health and healing journey. And certainly we do have as a practice a lot of clinical knowledge and expertise and different things like that. But also I I love the trauma healing space. I love helping women feel more connected to their bodies, to their emotions, helping them maybe zoom out a lot of times, both zoom out and zoom in different areas of their lives. And there are some big universal themes that I don't think most of us talk about. And so I want to talk about some of these things and kind of that is the overarching theme of this episode. So if any or all of that sounds appealing to you, please continue to listen. And as always, we love and appreciate all of your support. And I am going to start throwing this in here a little bit earlier, but please like, subscribe, follow. 5-star reviews really, really do mean the world. I'll tell you, I read them. A lot of times I reread them if I ever need a little emotional boost. And just, to remind me that I and we are on the right track in what we were doing and how we were helping people. And, I think this is a good place to start. And, there's always going to be naysayers. I grew up in my family. It was my mom and I, if you don't already know that, it was my mom and I. My mom was an alcoholic. I put those pieces together and found that out pretty early. I was 7 when I found that out and started to really understand what that meant and how that looked. And my life drastically changed. And as many children who grew up in a lot of trauma related spaces, and certainly I experienced a lot of physical abuse. I experienced a variety of different other abuses in my life. I saw a lot of physical abuse growing up. And so my thought process growing up was to survive. And it was, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of this environment? Because I don't want to end up this way. And I fell into repeating a lot of the similar patterns that I was seeing, using alcohol as a main coping mechanism, getting into an abusive relationship in my early 20s, even though I promised myself I would never do that, and falling back into that relationship a couple times even after the fact. And being shaped by different relationships in my life, having to make some tough decisions and cut my mom off a variety of times in my life. And then, the most recent time, and I lost her when we were in the middle of a not speaking period of time. And by the way, I do not regret any of those decisions. And I'm firmly stand by all of those decisions to be in that position. I was taught growing up, you work hard, you do well in school, you go to college, you get a good job at a corporate position, and you work up the corporate ladder. There was never a mention. I know my mom was a business owner in her early to mid 20s, I think she was like in her mid to late 20s, somewhere in that time frame when she gave that up or stopped doing that. I know it was before me. I know I was not that decision. And then she was had a job that she really didn't like her entire life, and had a lot of relationship issues during those times. And you know looking back at my uncle, who was, I would say, the predominant male figure in my life growing up, he had a big corporate job for a long time. And he had his own flaws and made his own mistakes. And not a lot of great relationship models in my family, especially early on. And so when I grew up, that's what I thought. I did really well in school, and school was a way for me to escape growing up. So I was type A perfectionist. I was a straight A student. I did incredibly well. I took a lot of honors and AP classes. I was highly involved in other kinds of activities. I was not a big sports person, but I was involved in a lot of academic clubs, and I was highly involved in different orchestras growing up. And I carried that through college. I was a triple major in college. I was highly involved in college. And, in college, I found we can say I found my calling, but maybe not the right position for it. So my senior year of high school, actually, I really got into some international studies and some business classes. My mom was really pushing me into business. And when I applied to college, I actually applied to a lot of specific type of business schools, and ended up not majoring in anything related to business. I took one business class in college, an econ class, to fulfill some sort of general education requirement. It was kind of a joke of a class too. And, here I am 15 years later. We just had our 15-year anniversary from my graduation of college a few months ago. And, here I am running a business. And this is not the first business I've run, which it makes me laugh for sure. So when I think about all of this, and so I found my passion of helping people, and I wanted to help people, and I really loved travel, and I really loved the international community. And so that's where my initial passion where I found my initial passion here, and was an international studies major as one of my majors. I was a Spanish major as one of my majors, and spent some time, had some really incredible opportunities to travel abroad when I was young. I got a pretty selective internship at Peace Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C. between my junior and my senior year. I've been accepted into the Peace Corps a couple of times. Obviously, I've not gone, and ended up applying for Teach for America and got one of those positions, decided not to do it, and then got into the business world and then started running business. And then, I found my way back to wanting to help people and wanting to really be there as a support. And, for me, it does feel like I'm changing the world, and I'm not doing it on a big scale. And I don't think that's where a lot of real change happens. If I'm being really honest here, there's a big reason we don't talk a lot about politics in the business here. And I big change is hard and takes a lot of time. And I think there's a lot more potential impact, especially starting at an individual level. And so, I try and be the best person, the best woman, the best business owner, the best coach, the best practitioner that I absolutely can be, and also recognize I am totally and completely human, and I am flawed, and I am by no means perfect. By no means do I have all of this figured out. And the reason I say this is for a few reasons. One, it's okay. It's okay to be all over the place, to change your mind, to re-pursue a passion that you found many years ago or thought about, or to start a business that you never really dreamed of, and then be like, you know what? I'm just like, I keep coming back to this. I keep coming back to this. I'm feeling a nudge, a calling, a pull, I can't stop thinking about X, Y, and Z. And for me, that's never an accident. And when I created this business, I had come out from over a decade of being my own boss and or running businesses for other people, and managing a lot of other people, hiring and managing and all of those things. And honestly, I wanted a break when I first started this business, and I realized this is not going to be a big thing. It is going to be me, and I will scale however I see fit, maybe have someone behind the scenes, but I have no interest in managing anyone at that time. I was really burnt out. I had some not so great experiences. I managed some wonderful people over the years. I met some truly incredible humans, and I have also interviewed, hired, and managed some pretty horrible people, some people who have really did some harm to me, physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically as well. And I really needed a break when I first got into this. And now I I want to grow, and I want to scale. And at the same time, I refuse to do it the wrong way. And I refuse to not have great people with me, to not have people who don't care in similar ways, maybe not quite as much, but in very similar ways as me, who are supportive in very similar ways, who care about women and women's health, and the emotional and physical and psychological health of women, and want to be there to support in all of the ways. And obviously there needs to be some sort of clinical background with that as well. And this is a big role. And so for me, I really, we hear a lot, it is who you surround yourself with. And I have been incredibly fortunate. And we can call it fortunate. I would call myself fortunate. And at the same time, there was a lot of work that went behind this of who ended up hiring. The very first person I ever interviewed to work with me is with me and has been with me for almost 4 years now. We are coming up on 4 years, like in the next couple of weeks, which is wild to think about. And that's Amy, who's our virtual assistant slash anything behind the scenes. She helps. She is my right hand woman. She is my second in command for sure. And she was the first person I ever interviewed to work with me. And I knew right off the bat. And listen, I did interview, at least half a dozen other people to potentially support. And it was for a very lower level support when I first started. When I was first interviewing here, and here we are all these years later, and we have almost tripled in size, if not over tripled in size from where we were then to where we are now. And she's still with me. And she is, one of my dreams is, and one of my goals in this business is to be able to hire her full time and pay her really well in the way that she deserves. And she can just be the behind the scenes and sometimes front of the scenes a woman who helps and supports and is creative and manages and does all kinds of things because she's truly incredible. I've had the opportunity to have three other women work with me as practitioners, two of which are with me now, and we have very low turnover rates within our company. I mean, we have one turnover rate really, and that it was over 2 years, or almost 2 years, and it was. Anyways, so looking at this, I feel incredibly fortunate of the women who I've been able to surround myself with. So I think that's a big thing. I also think, and I know I was taught this pretty young, and I do feel like there's a lot of this still going on nowadays of competition. We have a lot of clients who come work with us, their life has changed quite a bit, and they want to come into the space and they want to be some sort of coach or practitioner or get some additional education and knowledge. And a lot of times, it's really interesting for me is that there is hesitation and they want to ask questions and they want to learn, and sometimes they're afraid to because I think, and sometimes this has been expressed to me directly and sometimes you read between the lines of competition. And here's the thing, anyone who wants to get in this space, if you have a big heart and you really want to learn, do it. Do it. It is not for the faint of heart. And at the same time, we need all the people, especially women, that we can get in this space who are actually caring, who are knowledgeable, who are open-minded to learn different things that we know to be true and is largely not accepted in Western American or in Western society. And let's just even say first world societies largely, because we work with clients all over the world, and this is not just a US thing, not just a Western hemisphere kind of thing. This is throughout the entirety of the world. We really see in developed countries. And I, you know, I, I'm seeing some things early on here going on in Japan right now. And if you haven't seen these, very fresh still. But check out what's going on with Japan's health system and some of the government and the pharmaceutical companies, and what the Japanese government is trying to do within their hospitals, and some decisions they've made here recently, and some of the pushback that they're getting from these big pharmaceutical companies. And that'll give you a lot of the answers that you really need as to what's going on with our system and why big piece as to why it's broken, and it's so broken, especially when it comes to women's health. So, if you are ever interested in this space and you just want to chat a little bit more, like book a free consultation, happy to do that. For brand new practitioners, I used to do, just like free pick my brain kind of sessions. I don't have the capacity at this moment to do that. At some point, I may open that up again. And I'm happy to come on podcasts and events, and especially for existing clients, of course. Absolutely. Let's have a conversation about it. So, different things like that. But we need people in this space. And what I'll tell people, a lot of times, if you're thinking about making a big change in your life, whether that's a career or something else, fear gets in our way a lot, and especially as business owners. And if you are a fellow business owner, I'm going to guess that you probably experienced this at some point. I'm going to guess, and or you currently experience it quite a bit, because I also know a lot of us experience this quite a bit just with my friends that I know who are business owners, and that fear can really, really put a pause on a lot of plans that we have, the overthinking that goes into this, fear of failure, fear of a lot of times it's fear of being seen, fear of being judged. And here's the thing, fear is never going to go away. Anytime I launch a new program or have a new idea or have a new thing, 100% I'm afraid it's going to fail. It's not even a question mark. I know when we get to the end and we're getting ready to launch, there's going to be fear that becomes very present in my body. And that comes up for me. And I have also done a lot of work, and I think this is one of the most beneficial things that we can do as potentially as humans, but especially as women, is to look at our relationship with fear. And this, whether that comes with a new job, whether I just had this conversation talking about negotiating, someone who was negotiating a better salary for herself in a new position. And we talked through some strategies, some things to do kind of mentally and emotionally to prepare for that. And not that I am a career coach or anything. And when she was talking about a lot of the emotions that were coming up around this and a lot of the hesitation and the fear and embarrassment and the judgment she was putting on herself, this is so universal. We can talk through that. Not that I'm an expert salary negotiator, and I'm pretty good at talking through the fear and the emotions and feeling into those and coming up with strategies to shift your relationship with fear. I think one of the biggest things we need to acknowledge is when we go into a situation, and as I stated in one of our last couple episodes, I don't talk about, I am not an anxious person, but I have anxiety present in my body. This is how I describe this with fear. I'm not a fearful person, and at times I do have fear present in my body. And fear, for me, the relationship that I have really built around my fear when it comes up is that it's new. I'm afraid fear becomes very present in my body when I'm doing something new and different. Because here's the thing, my brain, specifically our egos within our brain, are always trying to protect us, which is beautiful and amazing. How cool that our brain is always trying to protect us and keep us safe, which is amazing and great. And it bases this solely on previous experiences. So when we are looking to launch something, to do something, to whether this is a social media post, to change houses, change jobs, change areas where you're living, change your clothing style, change your hairstyle, whatever it might be, fear for me, and the way that I like to think about this, is it presents as something new. And I really don't know what the outcome is going to be. One, because no one can predict the future. Two, in theory. Two, our brain is always trying to protect us based on previous experiences. And when we have no direct previous experiences with this exact thing, our brain goes to the other times where maybe we have tried something new. And if we associate some of these previous experiences with failure and being a failure and being very hard on ourselves, feeling very bad, feeling very negative about ourselves, a lot of negative self-talk, well, of course, doing something new with that unknown outcome, if we're only looking at the past experiences, of course, so many people are going to be crippled by anxiety and fear. Of course, it only makes sense. Here's the other thing I would invite you to think about. And we're going to continue this conversation with fear. Is for me as a business owner, especially, and maybe because I got into the space when I was pretty young, maybe I'm not totally sure. I think some of it could be a little bit of my Sagittarius nature, and I'm a Sagittarius sun sign if we go into astrology, and sometimes blissful ignorance is a real thing with us. And just, for me, it's not about failing, it's about learning. And there's been a lot of times where I've learned a lot of things and learned a lot of lessons. There are still now a lot of times where I learn a lot of things and a lot of lessons. And, for me, as I've learned more and more in this space from like a specific physiology, biology, biochemistry, clinical standpoint, but definitely from a mental and emotional standpoint, the more I learn, the more I realize we don't know anything. We don't know. We don't really understand the body. There's so much we do not know and cannot explain. And the goal here then, so if we really don't know a lot, is to continue to learn and do our best with the knowledge that we have and always be open to learning more. Now, I think that can go too far, especially for practitioners. I know if you're a practitioner listening to this, the practitioner trap of needing to learn all of the things before you can practice is a real thing and it will forever hold you back if you are stuck in that. You're never going to learn everything. Start somewhere. You're going to learn a lot more by implementation than by forever only taking courses upon courses upon courses upon trainings upon courses and trainings and courses and trainings, which is a trap that so many practitioners fall into. And, when I talk to a lot of these women, especially women, and they're going through all of their trainings, and especially as I interview for practitioners within this, and this last round, man, there was a lot of really, really incredible and really incredibly smart women that I interviewed, and a lot of them had little to no application practice. And for me, the application pretty much always exceeds the knowledge base because I can teach a lot of the knowledge. I can't, it's much harder to teach someone how to be a human, to be empathetic, to be able to listen, to be able to thoughtfully respond after listening, and to be able to care. Those are really hard things for me to teach. I can teach someone how to read blood work. I can send them through a course. I can teach someone how we look at this, about how hormones work in the body, about shifts and changes that happen in the body, about histamine issues, about mold. I can teach that stuff. Those things are relatively easy, complex topics, and relatively easy to teach. But implementing that and being able to show up and care about someone and have those really deep listening skills and to be able to have a lot of self-awareness to not bring your own stuff into it and to be able to show up in a real way for clients consistently, I can't teach that. I absolutely cannot. And that is always a massive thing I look for whenever I'm hiring someone. And, this past round of hiring is the first time I hired someone who actually had like really pretty intensive knowledge base coming in, but she also had a lot of practical experience. And so that once again, like that for me matters. And there's still always more to learn and grow and, different things to lean into and all that kind of stuff. So when we talk about fear, fear is just unknown. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. So your brain usually will go into this panic mode. And one of the most beneficial things that you can really do around this, and tools that I have used personally, but also I've used with so many clients, and this is a pretty classic therapy tool as well. So this is not like just a big thing for reference. Is when you start to get into that pattern, first thing that you do, the sooner you can recognize that pattern, the better. And this takes practice too, because I get so many women being like, we talk about it, we talk about this, we talk about the strategies to do this. And they're like, Megan, I caught myself, but it was 30 minutes after the fact. And I had already done a full spiral and got into this hole and panic hole, fear and spiraling and anxiety. And it wasn't until like a while later that I even realized I had spiraled. And I go, well, that's the first step. Because 2 years ago, would you have been able to do that? And that is an invaluable tool, is to be able to recognize that within yourself and give yourself some freaking grace and compassion that you are not perfect, And it takes time to learn things, especially when it comes to yourself and your brain and your body. That it just takes some time, and give yourself some freaking grace that you're not going to be perfect when you first start any of this. Whatever this is, whether it's more of a nervous system stuff or you are making big changes and you're going to make mistakes, you're going to veer off your path. So when we think about this fear, can we pause that pattern? The sooner we can pause that pattern, the better. And once again, this takes practice. Then once we pause the pattern, then I like to say, let's acknowledge it. Brain, ego. Sometimes for myself, I like to use my own name. I go, Megan. Sometimes I call her Little Megan. Little Megan, I know. I know you are scared. I know there's a lot of fear coming up for you. I recognize that. I acknowledge this. I know this is new, but this is right. This is the right call. This is the right next step. And we're going to be okay no matter what happens, because you know what? Look back. Have you always been okay or become okay? And that answer is always yes. And so when we reframe that mindset when we're doing these new things, that goes such a long way. And so if you are thinking about something new, trying something new, building something new, making these big life shifts, when that fear comes up, when that anxiety comes up, it's okay. The more you can follow that kind of process and or tweak it to make it your own, and whatever words and whatever acknowledgement feels best for you, do that. But we've got to pause it. We've got to interrupt. I like to acknowledge it, and then I like to shift it into something new. And this for me is where a lot of brain retraining work goes a really long way. I've done a lot of brain retraining work, and it's been a highly useful tool for me. And right now I'm doing what I would consider even like a different version of that, and maybe even almost like a deeper, bigger different. It's a different version of that, using a lot of the guided energy work that I'm really doing. And there's some visualization that goes into that. There is some actual like energy work that goes into that. There is brain retraining, brain rewiring work that goes into that. There's affirmation work that goes into that. There's meditative work that goes into that. There's connection work with me, my body, my soul, my intuition, myself. That goes into that. And as I shared previously, the most recent work using Christina Rice's guided energy work, Next Level You is the name of it. This has really brought me back to myself and given me, I won't say different tools, but almost maybe a different level of intuition or connection within myself. Maybe it's a coming back home to myself for the first time in a while again, and almost catching up to where I am now, and be able to make some different and potentially what feels like deeper shifts to me in my personal life, in my business life, in a variety of other ways, in my own health and healing and different things like that. So I do think that goes a long way. So looking at this concept of fear and your relationship with fear, I think does go a really long way. And I think is really important because paralysis by analysis is a real thing. And what I have found working, especially with women, is that we are particularly hard on ourselves. And I don't find a lot of women actively talking about this. And I am very fortunate that I have met some really incredible women, especially in the healing spaces I have been in. And I have one friend in particular where she's also a business owner. And I mean, we're able to talk about things. And by the way, we're in similar spaces, and there's never been any competition between us. And one, that feels really nice. But also we're able to share like some of the big losses and successes that we both experience, and know that neither one of us is going to be judged or judgeful of the other. When you can surround yourself with other women like that, my goodness, I mean, it did a lot for my own healing. And I have found this with other women too, where it has provided just a deeper level of healing because it feels like a lot of times we all put this on this mask. We have this mask of we have our stuff together, we have our life together, we have parenting together, we've got being a woman together, we've got being a businesswoman together, a business owner, a stay-at-home mom, a working mom, a woman with no desire for kids, a woman who has a deep desire for children, and maybe that's not a real possibility for whatever reason. And we're all just doing our best. And so many of us don't feel good enough so much of the time. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that. So if you are making big changes and you're like, man, so and so has it all together. I see all these women on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, and I'm aging myself with the Facebook comment on YouTube, on whatever it might be. Most of us don't. And I think it's important that you hear that. And one of the most valuable things, especially as a coach, and if you are looking to get into coaching in whatever industry, excuse me, one of the most important things that I did was I worked with a lot of coaches. I have worked with a lot of coaches over the years. I've worked with a lot of different types of people who I paid and invested in to help me be, I want to say a better person, but to be able to learn, to be able to heal and grow and do a variety of things. That probably taught me more about how to be a coach than anything else. And I use the term coach very loosely because I do identify more as a practitioner, but I'm also realizing as I'm going here and as we've done a lot of changes on the inside of the business and some out on the outside of the business, but a lot of things on the inside of the business over the last year. And I just wrapped up a 3-month time period, but I was doing some really deep dives into some of the client stuff and some of the ways that we show up for clients and how we structure things and we've been working on these changes. And for me, it felt like being more involved in a lot of the client work again and more of the client work again was the best way to do that. And so that's exactly what I did is I took a pause on a lot of the other sides of the business. Not that I could completely stop, but just did a little pause on some things and really reassessed what we're doing and how we're doing it and what are some better ways and better tools and better resources and different things that we can do to show up better and be better for our clients and for just the women in the world to help with education and obviously anyone that who works with us and anyone who speaks with us and just be there as a tool and a support system. And it's been incredibly challenging from a stress standpoint, but also incredibly insightful again. And things started when I made that decision. By the way, that was not an easy decision to pause on everything else and really get back into the nitty gritty of doing so much of the client side of things. And takes a lot. I mean, it takes a lot of brain power. It takes a lot of emotional space, and to be able to do that, and then also be able to show up in my own life for myself and for Jonathan. In as we're married now, and not that there was any major changes with that, and but be able to show up as a really really good partner. For him to be able to show up in our home, to be able to show up in all the ways that he needs, desires and needs and how I want to be. And yeah, it's been a big balancing act. And fortunately Jonathan is an amazing human, which also goes a long way, by the way. If you have a supportive partner who can step up with and for you, and sometimes by stepping up, they're okay taking a little bit of a backseat for a little bit. And sometimes that is a part of this too. And when I decided this, Jonathan and I had a few conversations, and as I'm coming out of this period of time, Jonathan and I have continued to have a few conversations, and also continuing to understand where I am from a physical standpoint, where my hormones are, as I continue to work on optimizing those coming out of last year, and as I'm, getting back into working out and, you know, doing all these other things again, what do I need from him, and where do I maybe need a little bit of grace or extra space? How can he support me? How can I make sure I'm supporting him and be able to have those conversations and for him to approach those with understanding and not judgment. And we actually just had a conversation yesterday, and I was like, look, I appreciate the last week. I know I've been incredibly busy. It was the week before my period, had a lot going on. I wasn't sleeping really well, and I was struggling a little bit for sure. And I appreciate not putting pressure on me to cook when I really didn't feel like it, for helping me out whenever you could, and doing so in a way that I didn't feel resentment. I didn't feel negativity. I didn't feel extra pressure to have to, like, okay, I've just worked for 10 or 11 hours and now I have to go cook dinner. Then I have to show up as like a happy wife and like do all these things when reality I'm so tired, and I want to have like a nice dinner. I don't want to cook it and I want to watch a funny show and just like chill out and decompress for the next 45 minutes, and to be able to have him be on board with that. So having a partner goes a really long way. And also, I think it's really important that you are able to share what you need help with and that you cannot do it all. Because, ladies, we were not meant to do it all. It does not mean we are a failure if we can't do it all, if we can't keep up the pretty faces of, not, like, oh, we don't struggle and we just like always look good and we work out and none of us, none of us are perfect. None of us can show up that way all the time. Stop putting pressure on yourself to be perfect all the time. Ask for help. I know it's hard. I don't like it. And I'll tell you once again, the fear comes up, the judgment comes up, the self-talk comes up. Same concept. Pause the pattern. It is okay to ask for help. It is okay not to be able to do it all. It is okay to reach out to your support system. It is okay to uphold boundaries and to say no to helping other people when you, in fact, need more help. It's okay if helping people feels good, and at this moment, you don't have the capacity to do so. All of these things are okay, and all of these things are things that, once again, are pretty universal truths that I see so much among women. And just the amount of judgment on ourselves, all of these things go such a long way. And I'll tell you, especially when it comes to when I talk to a lot of business owners and new business owners who are thinking about getting on social media and posting on social media and have never done so or never done so in a professional standpoint, man, just the judgment that I and I all my one of my favorite questions is kind of twofold. One, what do you think's going to happen? Let's say you do this thing. Let's say you're in and this even goes into the workplace within your job, a bigger job, going back into a job where maybe you're not the most experienced, but you are qualified to do, and maybe it's just new for you. Think about all of the things. And what I always hear is, oh, people are going to say X, Y, and Z. People are going to say, oh, I'm a fraud. Oh, I'm faking it. Oh, what a terrible video. Oh, what a terrible person. Oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Oh, I could do way better than that. All of those things that you think people are going to say, probably not. A lot of that is probably things that, one, you've either heard in the past, and people have told you about a variety of things. I can almost guarantee they were not very healed and or happy individuals, because healing and or happier individuals, especially happy with themselves and their own lives, we tend to be pretty encouraging for other people. Just by and large, anytime anyone wants to get into a new relationship or get out of a relationship or change jobs or leave a job or think about starting a family. And when I talk to them and when I see the excitement, I hear the excitement when they're talking about the thing, do it. If it lights you up like that, do it. Say it out loud, do it. Talk about it. I want to hear about it. Even if I think it's crazy, whatever. I'm going to support you because if you get that lit up by it, I know you can do it. And there's going to be a lot of learning curves that go along with this, but that's also okay too. And that's part of the excitement. That's part of the journey of doing this. So the other piece is it's things that you are saying to yourself to talk yourself down. Here's the thing. We have a pretty big social media presence. We've got 200 and I think almost 230,000 followers on TikTok. We have 13,500 on Instagram. We've got, I think, almost 7 on Facebook. We've got several thousand people on our email list. Yeah, we get negative feedback, people say negative things to us. It's not all the time, and it is sometimes, for sure. Here's the thing, though. When people go out of their way to say something negative, it's because of them. It's usually not because of us. And if or they really don't know us, because if they took the time to look at our website, to maybe listen to a podcast episode, to listen to more than a 10-second clip, they know we care. They, it's pretty, you can hate us and that's fine too, because one, I don't need to be liked by everyone. I'm not for everyone. And that is something that took me a long time to come to terms with. And it is okay because you know what? The people who we are for, we really help. We really do. And we hear it. We hear it during our work together. We hear it after the work together. And it's really incredible. And we've got a pretty strong referral base because of that. And that tells me everything I need to know. And when people say a lot of negative things, when people go out of their way to say a lot of negative things to other people, it's because they're unhappy. And so if you feel that level of judgment for yourself, one, I bet if you do the thing, even if you do hear some negative feedback, a lot of it's because they're unhappy with themselves. And it really has nothing to do with you. And or they're also really afraid for you. And they're afraid to see you go through the learning curves and the rough patches. Because a lot of people see those learning curves and rough patches as negative things. What I know, especially from being in the sales industry and starting my career in the sales industry, is every time something doesn't quite work out, it's a learning curve. It's also always one step closer to a yes and to the thing that is meant for me. And so when I look at this, I think about a path and I think about there's a straight path that is my life and my maybe potential life. If we think about timelines here, and I have this one that's like the most ideal one. I don't always follow that most ideal one, and most of us don't. In which case, we take a lot of detours, and sometimes the detours are the really fun parts too. For reference, so detours aren't always necessarily a bad thing, and so when we take these detours. It's just a veer. It's just like a loop around. And there's a lot of like things to be learned that way. And for me, I always think, well, I'm going to come back on the path, even if I veer off. I know, once again, as long as I'm listening to me, my intuition, to what is real for me, what feels good for me, what brings me joy, what lights me up, I'm going to get back on the path. And so it's never about taking the wrong path. I don't think there's never a wrong path. There's detours, there's side loops, there's some interesting little curves and maybe some trails that I didn't necessarily have to go on, and there was a lot to be learned, by doing any or all of those things. So thinking about that can also take a lot of pressure off of ourselves of, I'm just going to learn the thing. I'm going to try, I'm going to put it out there. And one of the things that made me really like a breakthrough piece of my business and this business is I started working with a coach several years ago. It was my fourth or fifth business coach at the time, and new marketing strategy. We were going heavy on TikTok, and he told me like, "Hey, you're gonna post 3 new videos every single day for the next 3 months." And I looked at him because I had posted, I don't know, a dozen or 2 dozen times in total on TikTok and in general on social media. I was pretty good, doing on social media posts, but being on video and in video 3 times, so 21 videos a week for 3 months. Holy moly, no thank you. And I said, I am not a fan. And he said, will you just try it out? Give give me 90 days. And I said, okay, all right, I will try. I will follow this. And you know what? It didn't even take. I don't think it even took 30 days before we started seeing traction. And not that my videos were necessarily great because they weren't. If you go back to some of those, for sure, a lot of room for improvement. But here's the thing, I got a lot of practice in. I got really comfortable on camera during that period of time, and I learned how to be consistent. And it made a massive difference. And I got to learn a lot about who I was talking to, how I was talking to them, things that people resonated with, things that people did not resonate with, things that were a little too high level, things that were a little too low level. And I learned a lot. And I didn't stop after the 30 days or after the 90 days. People go into wanting to be on social media and be like, all right, well, I'm gonna post this week. I'm gonna be really consistent this week and see what happens. What in your life, if you did it for just 1 week, are you gonna be extremely successful with? I don't know. I literally cannot think of one thing where in just 1 week it'll be amazing and great. Things take time. And so when we put in that consistency, and whether this is working out, whether this is eating healthy, whether this is drinking water, whether this is getting natural light, spending more time outside, training for a thing, starting a new business, learning a thing, getting into a new space, whatever it is, you're not going to be great at it at first, and that's okay. And so if we think of it as learning opportunities, doesn't that take a lot of pressure off yourself? Can't you just feel that weight coming off of you? And how good does that feel to not have that level of pressure put on yourself? You're not going to be great at something new. Most of us aren't at most new things that we try. Every once in a while, you might find something that you are really great at when you first start. But it's more uncommon than common. And so if we think of something as practice, I'm going to go, I'm just going to practice. This is how I really got into the functional movement space. And I was like, you know what? My body, I'm realizing that my body is not moving in the most optimal ways. And I can squat, I can deadlift, I can like do the things. And I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to learn new movement patterns. And I'm going to set myself up as a way to reduce my chronic pain and learn new movement patterns. By the way, I did the same thing when I really started shifting like nutrition. And I said, look, like this is a really new way for me to eat. I am going to really like learn how to cook and cook in a way that's really nourishing, but also tasty for my body. And not that I was a bad cook before, because I wasn't. I was a pretty decent cook. And I've definitely come a long way. And so, just think about these things. I'm going to learn about my body. I'm going to learn how my body moves and how it feels when I move it in certain ways. When you're starting a business, I'm going to feel into what feels good, how to show up, recognize that I'm not going to be perfect when I first start going on camera on social media, or when I start a business plan because I've never written a business plan before, or when whatever the thing is, it's okay not to be great at it at first. But use it as a learning opportunity and make sure you have a little bit of buffers in place where, if you're going from a very successful job and you're starting a new business, maybe not like quit right away and then like just get started. Yeah, that's not the way most of us do this. I was a little over a year, almost a year and a half in my business when I went full time. But I was not full time for the first year and a half. And I just went over 5 years. And it really wasn't until that second, not even when I was, I mean, even when I was full time, when I first went full time, like okay money, but not barely scraping by for sure. And then the following year, it took about a year after that, when things really started to pick up and shift and change and start doing quite well, and really start growing, and then be able to bring on other people in the business and feel good about that and want to do that, and then continue to grow and expand from there. And we've been able to build a multiple six-figure coaching practice at this point, where we're still, we don't charge for tests, we don't overcharge for supplements, we're not, we're making real change, in my opinion. We're making real change. And that is also feedback we get from so many of our clients. So when you're trying something new, you're not going to be good at it. Just do it. Get the practice. Think about it as practice. I'm going to go in, I'm just going to practice. I'm going to practice. I'm going to practice yoga. I'm going to practice mobility movements. I'm going to practice eating better. I'm going to practice mindfulness. I'm going to practice showing up on social media. I'm going to practice X, Y, and Z, whatever it might be that you're doing that's new. Think of it as practice. And this goes a really long way. But it also takes a lot of pressure on yourself to be great at it right off the bat. The other thing, especially from a business owner, and I'll probably wrap up with this, is when you're getting into something new like this, especially if you are going into running a business. And I'll also say this, I mean, I'm not a mother, and I do hear and see this quite a bit with mothers as well, is, these little humans that you are raising, this business that you are building and growing, is a direct reflection on you, for better or for worse. That was a pretty hard pill for me to swallow early on. And I've had to revisit that on multiple occasions. And it's not always the most pleasant thing to look at, especially, we've had ups and downs, and we have hit some low points. We've had many high points, and I've hit low points and had to really, really evaluate myself, where I am, how I'm showing up, for myself, how I'm showing up for clients, how I'm showing up for the other practitioners, how I'm showing up in the growth of the business, how I'm showing up in my relationships, how I'm showing up for myself. Am I even showing up for myself? And where am I potentially falling short? I really do believe, especially as a business owner, our businesses are a direct reflection, especially if you're a small business owner, a reflection of us. And it has been no surprise, and yet still a good reminder this year so far, that the more work I do on myself, the better energy that I show up with, and that it is confidence, but it is a humble confidence. It is a deeply reflective state. Anytime anything goes wrong in the business, or doesn't go quite as we would like, or I would like, the first thing I always do is, okay, what could I be doing better? And we talk about this, and we have a practitioner meeting every single week, and we talk about this all the time, and I just had a conversation with one of our practitioners, and going into that, I really had to think, where am I falling short? How am I falling short? How am I not showing up or communicating the way that I want and need to be to get the desired result? And so having that consistent self-reflection goes a long way, but I'm not judgmental on myself. It is, okay, how could I be showing up differently? How could I be communicating differently? And what does that look like? But not from a negative standpoint. It's from how do I continue to improve? Because I'm not perfect, I'm flawed. And what does that really look like? What does that feel like? And what are different ways that I could be doing better? And need what are areas of my life that I need a little bit of improvement, need some support, need something different. And this is where really the energy work, the guided energy work has come a long way for me and it really helped me as a tool in this year so far in coming to better conclusions as to answering those questions. So those are some really big things to think about. And once again, if you're having big changes, if big things are coming up in your life and you're making these big shifts or adjustments or making some big decisions right now, really encourage you to do a lot of self-reflection, some more to deeper connect with yourself, your heart, your intuition, your gut, to be aware of the patterns, default patterns that you are running, and to just be a little more gentle on yourself because look, none of us have it all together. None of us are perfect. Despite what you may see, none of us have it all together, and that is okay. And there's a lot of beauty in that. And I think when we can drop a lot of those shields or images that are often present, and especially among women, and show up as we really are, I think there can be so much more growth and opportunities and just love and support for each other, which I think we all could benefit from. I think the world could benefit from. So thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, follow as always. Once again, it really means a lot to us with our, and we'll see you next time.